Welcome to Animal Welfare, the Good, the Bad, and the Shouldn't They Be in Jail. This is episode 2 of the series. We're going to start by talking about what is the actual difference between an animal rescue and an animal shelter. This is a really good question because a lot of people think they know the difference, but they actually don't, or they have some misconceptions about it. So to understand what we're going to talk about in the coming weeks, we have to understand first the core differences. Before I get into it, I want to talk about one thing, and that is the term no-kill. A lot of people think that no-kill means that an animal shelter or rescue does not euthanize any of their animal population. This is not true. The term no-kill actually means that a shelter or rescue organization euthanizes less than 10% of their population per year. That 10% is given for extenuating circumstances. For example, an animal with a very poor prognosis, an animal who maybe has suffered years and years and years of neglect and is not medically treatable. Maybe an animal is born and incompatible with life for some reason. There are a variety of reasons, but that 10% is meant to kind of be like a buffer. Let's talk about the fundamental difference between shelters and rescues. The first is location. Shelters are usually a physical building that have operating hours and they have staff. A rescue, on the other hand, is usually foster-based, meaning the animals live in homes and live more like pets until they are adopted. Fundamental difference number 2 has to do with how each entity handles stray animals. Shelters are usually required to take stray animals because they have some sort of city, county, or state contract that requires them to do so. Animal rescues, on the other hand, are not required to take in stray animals, but sometimes do if they have the capacity and resources. They do still have to follow the same legal processes as a general member of the public might have to. That way, if someone is actually looking for this animal, they have higher chances of finding it. Difference number 3 is funding. Shelters are usually funded by tax dollars, donations, and volunteers. Rescues do not get tax dollars, so they are funded solely by private donations and volunteers. Most of them are 100% volunteer, meaning nobody gets a paycheck, but there are some situations where maybe there's a vet tech on staff or a vet, or there's somebody needed that does have to get a paycheck. Difference number 4 has to do with the type and quality of care an animal receives. When it comes to shelters, shelters have more animals coming in and going out than a rescue. So they typically do what I consider to be the bare minimum, which is spay or neuter, core vaccine, rabies vaccine, and microchip. That's what they have the capacity to do. They don't have the ability to handle larger major medical cases. Rescues, on the other hand, typically do because they're smaller and can offer individualized care. So rescues will do the bare minimum, as stated before, but then also do other things. Like, for example, I run a Chihuahua rescue. Chihuahuas are notorious for having bad teeth. So we do a lot of dentals and they are very expensive, and we do them for every dog that needs it. A shelter might not have the ability to do that. So that's one example of a major difference between the quality of care. Also, shelters do not have the ability to do individualized care or specific rehab, whereas rescues typically can do that. So the next big difference is no-kill status. It's what I was talking about at the beginning of this video. You're much more likely to encounter a no-kill rescue than a no-kill shelter. And the reason for that is because shelters are required to take in stray animals. And when more animals are coming in than are going out, you get to maximum capacity a lot faster. And at that point in time, shelters are required to make some really hard decisions. And it's super unfortunate. Rescues, because they can be a little bit more choosy, they're not required to take stray animals, and they only can do so if they have the capacity and resources, means that they don't have to make those hard choices nearly as often. Okay, so the next part here is the adoption process and return rates. At a shelter, when you go through the adoption process, it's the same process for every animal. So you fill out a short application. If it's approved, you pay your fee, you head out the door with your animal. Return rates for shelter animals are usually higher because sometimes people make impulse decisions. Sometimes people get home and realize that they bit off more than they can chew. Sometimes they get home and maybe the adopted animal doesn't get along with an animal that's already in the house, or with maybe a child or something like that. So return rates are usually higher with shelter adoptions. With rescues, the adoption process takes a lot longer. Usually there is an application, then there's a waiting period, then there's usually some sort of either home check, interview, meet and greet, or all of the above. Return rates are usually a lot lower for a couple of reasons, and that has to do with the fact that many rescues are foster-based. So things that could become problems later on are usually identified before the adoption is even processed. And also, when it comes to the waiting period, it gives people time to think about their decision and make sure that, oh yes, I really want to adopt this breed. Oh yes, I really want to adopt a puppy or a senior, or I don't want to go through the puppy stage. I want to adopt an adult. It gives people time to think about the decision before it's finalized. So this is just a review of the general differences between a shelter and a rescue. Obviously, there are good shelters and there are bad shelters. There are good rescues and there are bad rescues. We also did not touch on things like sanctuaries, humane societies, which can vary from organization to organization. Some might act like a shelter, some might act more like a rescue. We did not talk about friends of organizations, which usually focuses on helping one particular type of animal or one particular shelter. And we did not talk about for-profit rescues, which are very few and far between. So there is more to it, but this is just kind of the basics that I wanted everybody to be able to understand. If you could interact with our video, if you could, please follow us. We're trying to get to 10,000 followers, so that way we can start monetizing our content, which will help us raise money for the animals that are in our care. Thanks so much.